Good morning to you. I am Mark Sott with HurricaneTrack.com here. I'm in Dallas, Texas today. I'll explain why in just a minute. It is Monday, the 8th day of May, 2023. Got a lot to talk to you about today. We're going to look at the SOI, what that means, just a real quick refresher on it, global sea surface temperature anomalies, and then some climatology, because I think we're going to really need that this season. Really going to be hard to figure out what's going to happen. We've got this very favorable Atlantic look. Sea surface temperature-wise, we've got the developing El Nino, we've got this cold PDO, the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, and it's just going to be a real head-scratcher this time around. So we're going to look at that. I'm going to show you some graphics from the North American Multimodel Ensemble, the NMME, that came out recently. A lot of people talking about that on weather Twitter, as we call it. And then, of course, we'll look at some lower 48 weather, including the threat of severe weather this week. Luckily, it's not going to be very pronounced, no areas of major severe weather, but, and hence the reason I am in Dallas, it is May, there is severe weather, so we're going to use that opportunity to test some equipment and just kind of be out in nature and see the storms, really kind of dusting things off, making sure our camera systems work, but put them in use during severe weather. I'll talk about that more in just a little bit. All right, let's get started, get on with this first. Our good friend, the SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index, and it's just that. It's just an index. It's a difference in pressure between Tahiti and Darwin, and you have a formula that's run, and it gives you the daily contributor. You add all those up, and you get these different averages. And the bottom line is when the SOI is positive and strongly so, you're more in La Nina, and when it's negative and strongly so, and also consistently so, you're in El Nino. And we can see the different contributors here are all pretty close to average right now, or neutral. But look at where we have come from. 10, a solid La Nina state back in February. We dropped it in March, came up just a little bit in April, but the overall trend of the Southern Oscillation Index is down, and that means we are headed more towards an El Nino, where we have lower pressure typically in the eastern Pacific, higher pressure in the western Pacific, and that net flow of air is typically from west to east. When you have that set up, that's what a low SOI does, very simplistically explaining it, of course, and that helps to drive the El Nino, because normally when you have a high SOI, you have stronger occurrences over time. And then you get to August, oh yeah, things really start to light up in a typical season. But I will say this, will bring me back on for a second. One of the things that El Nino does, let's choose a color that'll pop here. We'll use, let's see, they're all in that, let's use purple. Maybe that'll show up pretty well. So El Nino typically imparts shear across this area and even parts of the southern Gulf of Mexico, because you got a lot of upward motion in the Pacific, and that upward motion spreads out across the mid to upper levels of the atmosphere, and you get wind shear. The air or the upper level winds blowing against what's coming in from the east, or basically a change of wind direction with height, the very simple definition of wind shear. Typically that is enhanced during an El Nino, but it doesn't mean that El Nino drives everything, because the very warm Atlantic that we're looking at might, and we don't know yet, we're going to have to just find out together, unfortunately, and I think it's good to be honest and say we don't know, that warm Atlantic might counter the El Nino. We haven't seen it this warm in a long, long time in the Atlantic Basin. We're going to go back to this map real quick. That is a very, very favorable look. So will this create more upward motion in the Atlantic? And even look, it's even warm across the Caribbean. But bottom line, this is going to be hard to figure out, and climatology is going to have to be helpful here, I think, going forward. So there's August. We'll see, does it end up like that? You know, stay tuned, right? September, the peak months, the density shifts out to the main development region out here, and then through there up, usually recurving. I mean, most hurricanes do recurve. If they didn't, nobody would live at the coast. And a few, of course, get through and they make landfall, as we know, painfully, right? So that's what climatology looks like. Will that be the way things go this year? We're going to have to just wait and see. But to that end, there's some interesting things out there that have been happening. Here's a tweet from Eric Webb, and this goes to what I was saying. He mentioned here, this is back on May the 5th, I believe, that this year's Atlantic hurricane season may be a nice reminder to forecasters, researchers, and enthusiasts alike that there's more to seasonal forecasting than ENSO, which is, you know, El Nino Southern Oscillation phenomenon, even when it is strong. Outside the Caribbean and Southern Gulf, like I just showed you, the El Nino influence on Atlantic tropical cyclone activity and the variability of that is limited at best. So just, you know, we have to be careful that we don't overhype something, whatever that something might be, and overhyping El Nino, that it is the savior that'll keep us from having any kind of a hurricane season, is just wrong. Because even in an El Nino year, you can have one that sneaks through and you can have a really bad situation. There's lots of examples of that, all right? So a really helpful and insightful tweet there from Eric. Now, one thing that I've been seeing here on social, specifically Twitter, the last few days is the new Multimodel Ensembles, the North American Multimodel Ensembles, the NMME, basically like a super cluster of a bunch of ensembles that helps to at least maybe paint a picture of what might be happening going forward. And this is the precipitation anomaly, total precipitation anomaly in inches, and of course your time scale is May. So this is May, and of course green and the different densities or gradients of green is more precip, and the yellows and browns down here less precipitation or lower than average. So that's May. Here's June, and it's interesting. Southwest Atlantic pretty active in June, and a pretty active, fairly far south intertropical convergent zone once we get to the start of the hurricane season. That's just a month or so away, so we'll have to see. You know, it could be pretty active in and around the Bahamas. That's a good look, by the way, from the nation's midsection for precip, for storm chasing, as a hobby, as a research, as a vacation, whatever, and really good to see for our agricultural interests, honestly. Positives sometime, even when the weather's bad, right? This is July. Now, July, that is a really interesting look. You come off Africa, wet there, wet across the deep tropics, right through the northeast Caribbean, and then a pretty dense area of higher precipitation anomalies. I mean, they're not off the chart or anything, not even close, but that is an interesting look in the Southwest Atlantic. And, this is just like, again, a whole bunch of models, and you get averages. It's hard to explain how this is derived, but this isn't what's going to happen. This is a snapshot of what could happen and what the many different models are seeing as sort of an amalgamation of all the precipitation possible. And these are your anomalies. You know what I mean? It's a guidepost. But that's interesting. You can see that aim, that track right across the deep tropics and towards the Bahamas and the peninsula of Florida. So we'll see. We'll be able to verify this by July 31st. We will know, right? August, we start to calm things down a little bit. There's the influence of the El Nino, probably a dry Caribbean. Not good news for our friends down there. This is interesting. Some possible Bay of Campeche action. You never know. And then there's your typical August tracks with a recurve look to it overall. So Bermuda, you might have to watch out. We'll see. My friend Howard over there might be coming to see you. You never know. But then September, it's kind of a head scratcher because you shift back towards the southeast United States, the southwest Atlantic, this cluster, and then some activity out here in the deep tropics with a very dry, far deep tropics through the Caribbean and a fairly dry Gulf of Mexico, if the NMME is to be believed, if it's accurate. And, well, how has this done in the past? I could take an hour trying to explain that. Some years it does well, some years it doesn't. September's a long way away. I would think, right now, let's look at June and maybe July. Those looked pretty active overall, as I showed you, with precip anomalies around Florida, the southwest Atlantic, and we'll be able to verify that, like I said, within the next 70 to 80 days. We'll know. And that's not that far out when you're talking about large-scale signals like this. All right? So for what it's worth, there it is. Real quick, just related to the tropics, a quick scan of the 850 millibar level over the next week to 10 days or so. Nothing that catches my eye. What am I looking for? I'm looking for areas down here that focus, these areas of vorticity. Does anything jump out as being consolidated and round or whatever? And no, the answer is no. Through the next 10 days, nothing down in the deep tropics. So the Caribbean, the Gulf, no gyres, no Central American gyre setting up where you get that big turning down here. None of that starting to show up just yet. So let's move on to severe weather real quick. Bring me back on for a moment. So again, I'm in the Dallas, Texas area. I'm going to be meeting up with a couple of colleagues. Both of their names are Matt, so go figure. Matt from Colorado, Matt from Wichita, and one of our supporters, a gentleman named Jeff over in Weatherford. Lots of people helping out with our project through our crowdfunding over on Patreon, our Discord, our project that we've been doing for the last almost 20 years now to mainly study hurricanes. But now, because of the vast amounts of technology that we've got, and by the way, every bit of it was crowdfunded. Literally, people bought all the equipment that we're using. I like it when that refreshes right in front of my eyes. You never know, it might pop up something interesting. But we have to test this equipment. You want us to be as ready as we can be, maybe try some new things, try to be innovative. And what better way to do that than to expand out into other weather areas? Nor'easters, I've definitely done that since 2014 in a purposeful and professional setting. I mean, I've been in snowstorms before 2014, of course, but I started actively getting into more impactful weather events since about 2014. First, it was the nor'easters and big winter storms along the East Coast, eventually expanded to lake effect, the southwest monsoon, and some severe weather in the plains, but that has all gotten to be more and more lately in terms of our participation outside of just doing hurricanes. And I think it's just good practice. It helps to keep us in tune, try new things, like I said, get our back-end team, CJ and Mike and Kari and Tim, all the back-end folks, even Howard with suggestions, our Discord family. We all work together to make sure, and I said this at a conference recently, all roads lead, I think I said this on Fox Weather the other day, actually, sorry. All roads, my mind, all roads lead to hurricane season in my metaphorical hurricane highway, right? So everything we do, just like you, the battle for winning against hurricanes is done outside of the season. So that's why I'm out here. We're going to do some active work, practicing things, making sure we're ready, and again, doing it in a severe weather setting. It's just more interesting. We have the funding, we have the support with people, and of course the money that helps make it happen. It's expensive to do this. You chasers out here, you know that. So that's why I'm here. So now that that little monologue is out of the way, let's show you what we've got. This is today's SPC, mostly over in this area, the slight risk, way far away from where I am, but that's okay. It'll change tomorrow. At least it's not looking really, really rough out here. In fact, the tornado threat, while not zero, it's still not too worrisome, 2% there in parts of the Ohio Valley and southwest from there. Just keep an eye on that. Again, 2% is not zero, but I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Just pay attention. The wind threat, a little bit higher at 15%, and then the hail threat could be pretty significant in parts of Missouri and southern Illinois. So just pay attention to that. Use Radar Scope or whatever radar app you've got and stay on top of this stuff. You don't want the hail damage if you can avoid it. All right, day 2, that's our active day tomorrow. We're talking parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas as the pattern starts to favor more of a threat there, 2%. I think this will increase a little bit tomorrow. The wind threat also, 15% or so. And then the hail threat, pretty significant there. And what we're going to do, just real quick, our plan is to use the same equipment that we use in hurricanes to put out in front of an approaching supercell. We've tried a couple times over the years when you get your slight or your moderate or whatever to put cameras around that geographic area and just see what we get. Kind of a hit and miss. You see the storms in the distance. It's kind of neat, but that's not as practical as just waiting for the high-resolution models, specifically the HRRR, the high-resolution rapid refresh model or something like that. These are called CAMs, convectively allowing models. And once the CAMs models show us where the storms should be, we get out there, we get ready, supercells form, we track them on radar scope, we get in front of them by about 10 or 15 minutes before they get to us. We drop our line of cameras and pressure sensors. Other people have done similar projects in the past. We're trying to really do it with cameras, high-resolution GoPros, live cams, in about a 2-mile space. And we call it the fence. What a great name, right? Literally because we will use a lot of the barbed wire fences that are out here to clip these camera boxes on. They're very small. And I think we could really see some interesting things. Hail, gusts of wind that come through, and maybe a tornado. But the tornadoes are not the goal. Practice is the goal. Communication with our back-end team is the goal. Just getting ready in the severe weather setting. But I think we've got an interesting little idea here. We've tried it a few times over the years, and each year we get a little bit better. So we shall see. That's what we're doing. Let's get this back to categorical so that I can show you day 3. So that's day 2. Here's day 3. If I can get this to work. Come on. The little arrow that sticks on there. So day 3 is going to be back up towards Colorado and even southeastern Wyoming. That could be interesting just coming off the Front Range. Matt from Colorado, you might as well have just stayed in Parker, my good friend. But it's going to be an interesting week. We're going to be out here through Friday, and we'll be streaming live on our YouTube channel. So if you're a subscriber on our YouTube channel, make sure you're got that notification set so that you get notified. Hey, HurricaneTrack is live. We'll be live tomorrow, probably Wednesday and probably Thursday as well. Maybe Friday, we'll see. But again, we have a purpose out here. We're going to try to do some interesting things, bring you along with us through that process when we're streaming live on YouTube. And of course, I need to start mentioning this more and more now as we get to hurricane season. We do have our Patreon. It's a little over 500 members strong. We got a good core group, and they have funded everything that we're doing. And I'm very, very proud of that fact. If you want to become part of it, it's a pretty cool thing. We've got our Discord channel on Patreon. We've got our exclusive podcast, original programming that I create with the Hurricane Highway series. We drop those episodes first for our patrons, and there's a lot of interactivity and just a wonderful community of like-minded people that are interested in weather, and they just want to stay on top of things. All right? All right, let me get this processed, and it's probably going to take forever to upload from the hotel here. So let me shut my trap and do that and get it ready for you. Again, thanks as always for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth in Texas. I'll see you again live on YouTube sometime tomorrow afternoon.